Why didn't you notify the federal authorities? Why did you send this threatening letter on behalf of these two men who were convicted of crimes?
I was terrified of them and wanted no involvement with them.
So you wanted no involvement, but you sent a letter that says you...
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, Mr. Chairman, I want to say thank you for your strong statement on the RICA legislation yesterday and for your leadership on this issue. It's much, much appreciated. Director Stone Manning, let me just start with this. When you came before this committee in 2021, this is before I was a member of the committee, you were asked as part of your confirmation whether you'd ever been investigated, arrested, charged by any federal, state, or local law enforcement authority for the violation of any federal, state, or local law, regulation, or ordinance other than a minor traffic offense. We asked that question of all people before the committee. You answered no. Do you stand by that testimony?
Senator, I do stand by that testimony and was proud to be confirmed to do this job.
What's tree spiking, Director?
Senator, again, this committee engaged quite a bit in...
No, that's a factual question. Do you know what it is?
And I do. It is...
Do you want to tell us? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's when people illegally put metal objects into trees so that they prevent a timber sale.
What happens if a chainsaw hits a spike?
Sometimes when a chainsaw hits a spike, it can buck the saw.
Yeah, violently recoil, potentially kill or seriously maim the loggers.
Yeah, which is why I notified the federal authorities that I had heard that had happened.
Loggers like, for instance, George Alexander, this is from an article on the Washington Post explaining what happens when trees get spiked. Loggers who are blue-collar workers, by the way. These are not wealthy people. These are not people who have had the advantages perhaps you and others have had. People like George Alexander, who, for example, in May 1987, at age 23, his chainsaw hit a tree spike. I'm quoting, his face was slashed from eye to chin, his teeth were smashed, his jaw was cut in half. That's a typical reaction when a logger hits a spike. Now, you just said, I think just a second ago, that you were involved. There were two people convicted in 1989 of putting 500 pounds of spikes in an Idaho forest. Senator Rich mentioned this just a moment ago. You testified you sent a letter to the Forest Service on their behalf. I have it here. The letter says, among other things, this letter sent to notify you that the post office sale, that's the forest sale in Idaho, has been spiked heavily. The reason for this action is that this piece of land is very special to the earth. It is home to the elk, deer, mountain lions, birds, and especially the trees. It goes on, I would be more than willing to pay you $1 for the sale, but you'd have to find me first, and that could be your worst nightmare. P.S. You bastards go in there anyway, and a lot of people could get hurt. Why'd you send this?
Senator, as I said at the time, over 30 years ago, a really angry and turns out violent person handed me that letter and said, will you send this to the Forest Service?
And you did. Why?
What you just talked about in 1987 to a logger, this is 1988, 9. I understood that people could get hurt.
Why didn't you notify the federal authorities? Why did you send this threatening letter on behalf of these two men who were convicted of crimes?
I was terrified of them and wanted no involvement with them.
So you wanted no involvement, but you sent a letter that says you bastards go in there anyway and a lot of people could get hurt? Why didn't you just contact the FBI or anybody, any local authority?
Because the person who did this act threatened people's lives if they disclosed who did it.
Yeah, in fact, you were investigated for being involved, weren't you? Here we have a letter sent to this committee from the special agent of the USDA Forest Service, Michael Merkley, who was in charge of the investigation. He says, and he details this in the letter to this committee, that he investigated you for your involvement. He says, and I'm going to quote now, grand jury subpoenas were issued for hair samples, handwriting exemplars, fingerprints. These subpoenas were served on persons suspected of being involved, having knowledge of the incident, including Ms. Tracy Stone Manning. You've testified you were never investigated, ever for anything. Why'd you lie to this committee?
Senator, this committee delved deeply, went into the court records where I testified against these men.
Were you issued subpoenas?
No.
You were not issued subpoenas?
I was issued a subpoena to appear before a grand jury with
Really?
with
Because
about 13
here's what he
people.
says. Ms. Stone Manning was extremely difficult to work with. She was antagonistic. She was uncooperative, refused to provide her handwriting exemplars and fingerprints as ordered by the grand jury. It was not until after we informed her she would be arrested if she did not comply with the subpoenas that she provided the samples to me. So you were subpoenaed.
Senator Hawley,
You
your
were
time
the
has
target of an
expired.
investigation.
Do you have a question?
You were the target of an investigation. You lied to this committee. Why?
Senator, I never received a target letter. I'm curious, I understand why this committee jumped over 30 years of my career in considering my nomination and went to a salacious moment from graduate school where I tried to protect people. What I don't understand is why we're not looking at the last 3.5 years now.
Here's why.
Senator
It's because people are killed in these kind of incidents. It is an act of
Your
terrorism.
time is expired.
A special agent in charge found that you were involved. You lied to this committee in saying that you were never investigated.
Senator
you were never
Hawley.
the target of investigation. In fact, you were.
Your
You
time
lied to us
is
blatantly.
expired.
And you know it.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Director, thank you for being here. I have to say, I do agree with former President Kennedy as well as our ranking member. We need to maintain a living balance. And that's why I appreciate you working with us, particularly in Nevada, because you know the footprint BLM has in Nevada. I do want to talk a little bit about the resource management plan modernization in Nevada for that reason, because I think this is part of that living balance. Last year, I sent a letter supporting efforts by BLM state office in Nevada at undertaking that statewide resource management plan to allow for a comprehensive science-based approach to determine management for BLM lands across the whole state, and would thus be able to incorporate entire ecoregions, competing land use needs, and varied stakeholders. The effort is important, as you well know, in Nevada, because there's about 48 million acres of BLM managed land in my state. That's 3/5 of Nevada's total land mass. And currently, there are 12 resource management plans in effect, and with some completed over 36 years ago. These plans are out of date. They're impacting BLM's multiple use management mission across Nevada. Several rules are being processed at the department level that have significant impact to how the lands are managed in my state, which is very confusing for our state, local users, our local stakeholders, and local governments, including, let me just name a few, the oil and gas leasing rule, the solar PIS, the public lands rule. I can go on and on. There's over 12 of them. So I've been asking this, and I hope your answer today is similar to, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is an alignment of all of this so that our stakeholders know what to anticipate. And so my question for you is how are you managing the alignment for these nationwide rules with the particular needs in my state and other Western states that are dealing with these as well?
Senator, thank you for the question, and it gets at the sort of through line to our work, which is managing for landscape health and doing so in a responsible way that is fair to the American taxpayer. So you'll see how the renewable energy rule, for example, lists priority criteria for helping to drive where development goes. It incentivizes that development by dropping fees by 80%. That, coupled with the public lands rule that ups our game on using science and data to inform our decision-making, to make those decisions more durable, those then would be driven by resource management plans that allocate uses across the landscape. And so I think that the statewide RMP for Nevada is, I'm hoping it will be a model for the BLM. We've not done that anywhere else where we have one big overarching RMP. And so we're committed to seeing that through and perhaps having Nevada lead the way like it is on renewable energy.
Do you have a time frame on anticipate when that's going to be done?
These processes take time, and we are behind. I inherited a backlog, tens of millions of dollars of backlog of planning, but it's in the mix, and it's a priority, so it will be moving forward here
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Just keep in mind, all of the clean energy projects, the economic development, the environmental protection, all of the above is put on hold at times, waiting for the BLM to respond in this resource management guide that I think is important for the reasons that you've just said.
Yeah, and the chart that the chairman held up earlier, I mean, if we have up-to-date resource management plans, that makes our decisions more durable.
Mm-hmm. Let me jump really quickly to protecting Ash Meadows. Ash Meadows in southern Nevada is a national wildlife refuge, and the Devil's Hole unit of Death Valley National Park in Nye County. Mm-hmm. It's a spectacular resource. The fish there is being threatened by a proposal to drill into the sensitive groundwater, which would dry up seeps and springs that are at the core of the refuge. I toured this last month, and let me just say, every community leader that lives in that area, they're unanimous to see the department move forward with a withdrawal as quickly as possible, land withdrawal, to protect this area. Now, I get that Ash Meadows is managed by a different agency, but the withdrawal comes within BLM's responsibility. Can I get your commitment to work with me and our constituents in working on that withdrawal to protect not only the fish there, but that whole wildlife refuge?
Yeah, Senator, I commit to you that I'm going to come and visit it and learn about it firsthand so that I can speak with the Secretary about it. She, of course, is the person who has the authority to do mineral withdrawals, but I commit to you that I will dig in and learn about this issue.
And then finally, I'm going to submit for the record affordable housing. Thank you for the work that you're doing in Nevada around affordable housing. I would like to know, though, the most recent agreement that was entered into, and thank you, with HUD, is it working? And maybe we can have a follow-up on that. I know my time is up.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. That agreement happened because you asked me about it in my confirmation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Lee.
The Conservation and Landscape Health Rule that you recently finalized elevates non-use either on par with or arguably above multiple use. Now, according to FLPMA, BLM is required to manage for multiple use and for sustained yield, with multiple use referring to things like grazing, timber harvesting, energy, mining, and recreation. Can you cite a provision of FLPMA that allows for you to depart from that standard and to prioritize non-use instead of multiple use and sustained yield? What provision of FLPMA allows you to do that?
Title I, Section 103 is where the multiple use definition occurs in FLPMA, and it is very explicitly clear that managing for fish and wildlife habitat, managing for natural and scenic values, those are direct words from FLPMA, is our responsibility. And
yeah, look, I understand that, and that's as part of the sort of the recreation portfolio, and you've got the ability to do that. I don't think there's anything in there though that authorizes you to do exactly what you're doing here, which really is for deliberate, long-term non-use. This is a frustration that I have, and it's not just me that has it. I hear every day, all the time, from constituents, from local officials, who are increasingly frustrated at the direction that BLM has taken under your lead. Now, keep in mind, the federal government owns 67% of the land in my state, and the biggest share of that is Bureau of Land Management. And so we live as subjects to the Bureau of Land Management. And increasingly, BLM under your leadership seems to have taken an approach that manages these lands like a museum. It's a you can look but you cannot touch sort of approach. These are in people's backyards. You can hardly throw a rock in any direction in Utah and not hit federal land. Now, that portion of the land in my state, the portion of the 67% of the land in my state owned by the federal government, your portion of it amounts to 22 million acres in Utah. That's 7 million acres more than all of the land, not just the federal land, but all the land in the state of West Virginia. And month after month, a sweeping new policy or management plan seems to be imposed by your agency, harming Utahns who rely on the land for their livelihood, who rely on the land for all sorts of things. Now, the agency has strayed pretty far from its statutory mandate to manage this land for multiple use and sustained yield. The conservation rule is a pretty blatant example of this museum approach of you can look, but you can't touch, one that's taken over the BLM. And I don't think it can be fairly reconciled with FLPMA. Now, Neda Wolf-Culver currently serves as the Director of Policy and Programs at BLM. And as you know, Ms. Culver previously worked as Senior Counsel and Director of the BLM Action Center at the Wilderness Society. While in that position, Ms. Culver was personally involved in advocacy and litigation regarding travel management planning and route closures in Utah. And in fact, Ms. Culver helped negotiate the settlement agreement a few years ago between various environmental NGOs and the Obama administration that established the process and the timelines for updating Utah travel management plans. Last fall, BLM closed 317 miles of historic roads in Utah as part of the update to the Labyrinth, RIMS, Gemini Bridges travel management plan. Director Stone Manning, Ms. Culver reports to you in her current role as Deputy Director. So I'd like a yes or no answer on this. Did Ms. Culver have any involvement in the decision-making for the Labyrinth RIMS plan?
Principal Deputy Director Culver does report to me, and the Labyrinth Travel Management Plan decision came from the ground where it should come from. And it was a part of a legal settlement. We got sued and...
No, I get that, but that's not my question. My question is whether she herself had any involvement in that.
Senator, decisions like that sometimes come to headquarters for review. I don't know if that particular plan came for review or not.
Okay, so look, she either recused herself from that decision or she didn't. Which is it?
Senator, she worked for the Wilderness Society and was wildly competent in that job.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
7 or 8.
That is not the subject of my question. What I want to know is, was she or was she not involved in that?
She does not have to recuse herself from the Wilderness Society. She is out of the recusal period.
Okay, so you're saying that it's okay for someone with a history of advocacy and litigation on these routes, not just routes like these, but on these specific routes. She was involved in litigation as an advocate specifically on these routes. Her name, I believe, is on the settlement, the consent decree documents that resulted in this process. Saying that it's okay for her to do this and that she can impartially oversee the BLM's travel management planning in that area.
Senator, we adhere to high ethical standards at the department, and we've done so here.
All right.
Senator.
Can I ask one follow-up? I'll be quick.
Very quickly, please.
All right, look, your updated Western Solar Plan expands solar development on public lands. How are you going to ensure that the expansion doesn't disproportionately limit other critical land uses, things like recreation and wildlife conservation and grazing?
Yeah, Senator, you've hit the nail on the head on what we do every day, right, is balance all of those uses. And the Western Solar Plan is going to help us guide solar development to places so that those decisions become more durable. So we've got this programmatic look at
Senator Daines.
Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you. Director Stomani, I would like to talk about the last 3.5 years.
Great.
This is the first time you're in front of the committee since your nomination back in June of 21. Since then, your actions your agency has taken or failed to take have been devastating to Montana and our rural communities that depend on federal lands for their livelihoods. It's no secret that the Biden administration, the EPA, the Department of the Interior, and the BLM are doing everything they can to eliminate oil, eliminate gas, eliminate coal production in the United States. And if anybody doubts that, go to the whitehouse.gov website. You can see it says Stop LNG, Eliminate Fossil Fuels. At least they're public about it. Let me name just a few actions that impact Montana. On day one, President Biden cancels the Keystone XL pipeline, a gut punch to so many eastern Montana counties, 1 million barrels a day stopped by Joe Biden. Day one, Biden starts stopping oil and gas leasing on federal lands. And then we've had an onslaught of rules from the EPA, methane rules targeting small oil and gas producers, the MATS and Clean Power Plan 2.0 that's targeting the Colstrip power plant. We are now on a path. 2 of our 4 Colstrip units have been shut down, power units. The last 2 now will be shut down unless these overreaches coming from the Biden administration are stopped. The Department of Energy they said pause, good grief. They stopped LNG export permits. The Office of Surface Mining slow walks coal permits in Montana in hopes the mines will be forced to close down. And now to the BLM. The BLM has only held 2 oil and gas lease sales in Montana since Biden took office. This is under your watch. You're supposed to have at least 4 a year. BLM's new public lands rule seeks to sideline oil and gas production. BLM's new oil and gas leasing rule sets bonding requirements so high, our small producers can't keep up. And just last month, the BLM announced a proposed plan to eliminate coal leasing in Montana and Wyoming. Wyoming's the #1 coal producer. Montana has the most coal potential of any states in the United States. And these are just the tip of the iceberg. The Biden administration has one goal. It's radical. It's to end oil, gas, and coal production in the United States. And you aren't hiding it. Director Stone Manning, the proposed Miles City and Buffalo management plans seek to end all coal leasing in the Powder River Basin. This extreme proposal seeks to end leasing in the largest coal-producing area in the United States, where almost half of all the country's coal is produced, and where coal mines serve as a key driver of the economy and maintain strong support from local communities and leaders. What reasoning, besides simply being opposed to coal, does the BLM have for closing leasing on America's largest coal field?
Senator, the President has asked us to transition to a clean energy economy, free of carbon pollution by 2035, and economy-wide by 2050. Lands leased in the Miles City field office are leased through...
Do you agree with the President's goal on that? Is that the right goal?
I do.
So you think we should shut down oil and gas and coal?
I think we're at record production.
Should we shut down? I mean, you just told me you're trying to go to zero. Do you believe we should shut down oil, gas, and coal production in the United States?
I believe that we should become energy secure through...
You're not answering my question. You just said you want to go to zero carbon. If you agree with the Biden administration's objective and vision, I'm asking you, do you think we should shut down oil, gas, and coal?
If you can let me finish my sentence, I would say to you, I believe that we need to transition to a clean energy economy built on renewable energy, which will keep this country secure.
Okay, that's green speak. would you answer the question, does that mean by getting to that we shut down oil, gas, and coal?
We're going to use oil and gas and coal for decades through the transition, but ultimately...
But do you believe we should ultimately shut it down?
We need it through the transition.
But you believe we should shut it down?
I believe that we're going to need it through a transition to a clean energy economy.
You should go talk to the Germans about that vision, see how that's working out for them. Have you personally talked to Montana coal communities and the families who will be negatively affected by your proposed plan? Have you talked to the Montanans out there?
Senator, as you know, I had the honor of serving
I know you did under Governor Bullock. I just want to know, have you talked to Montana families about this? Have you talked to the families impacted by the Keystone Pipeline being shut down? Have you been to Colstrip and talked to the families out there that are scared to death of what's going on with the Biden administration and shutting down their livelihoods?
I have been in Colstrip in front of 400 people when I was DEQ director.
No, wait, no. I know. How about as now you're a Fed? Have you been out there since you have been now implementing these policies to shut it down?
I have not spoken directly with families.
Okay. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. No.
Okay, I didn't think so, because if you did, you might get a little different view. You probably might get my view versus the view you're hearing from Joe Biden, which is so out of touch with where most Montanans are. The BLM's...
Senator Murkowski.
Mr. Chairman, let me just try to wrap up where we were with PL 5150. Do you have any idea the cost of the process, what it took to get to the draft RMP EIS?
For the Central Yukon?
Yes.
I don't. It's in the millions of dollars, but I don't have the direct
The
figure.
2020 draft RMP EIS cost the BLM a little over $5 million to produce. The final RMP EIS document says that it cost the lead agency, BLM, $6.7 million to produce. To kind of put that into perspective, the FY25 budget requests $28.8 million for the entire Alaska conveyance account. So you can see my frustration here. You've spent somewhere between $5 and $6 million of a $28 million entire budget, 10 years, and have gotten nowhere. And what you've told me is you have a manpower issue, which makes no sense to me that you would invest this money, invest this time, and then say, well, later. You made a commitment to me when you were before this committee 3 years ago, and you said, you have my commitment that I understand the job is to follow the law and that the federal government has commitments to the state of Alaska. You acknowledge those commitments to the state of Alaska. You know very well the Alaska Land Transfer Acceleration Act because I asked you about it then. I mentioned the report in 2009, the updated report in 2019, finding that the lifting of the vast majority of these withdrawals for the PLOs would be, quote, consistent with the protection of the public interests in these lands. Approximately 95% of these withdrawals would be that could be lifted are consistent with the protections of the public's interest. So you've got these findings, you've got the recommendation. I don't understand how the recommendation within the Central Yukon RMP to not lift any of the public land orders in that area is consistent with the act, consistent with your commitment to me that says, I get it, I know that the federal government has commitments to the state of Alaska, they're outlined in the law, and then 10 years, millions of dollars, and never mind, because that's where we're feeling like we are right now.
Senator, I'm going to get back for the record for you the budget question. It's my understanding that the Central Yukon RMP budget came out of our planning budget, not the conveyance budget.
So whether it came out of the conveyance budget or the planning budget, you've spent millions of dollars,
Yep.
10 years, and you've gotten nowhere. The last thing that I would like from you is in her hearing on May 8th, Secretary Holland was before this committee, and in response to me, on the Ambler Road, she promised that she would, quote, be happy to follow up with me on specific legal justifications. I asked the Secretary to provide, to make clear where it says that the access is superseded, Ambler's access is superseded by general right-of-way authorities for BLM provided by FLTMA. So, as a lawyer, I looked at that and said, that makes no sense to me. So I asked her, give me the specific legal justification. She said, happy to follow up. That was over a month ago. Can you give me that analysis that the Secretary promised?
Senator, the legal underpinnings, especially on our 810 requirements under ANILCA for subsistence, are going to be outlined and documented in the record of decision, which is forthcoming.
Well, it seems to me that when I asked the Secretary and she says, I will be happy to follow up with me on specific legal justifications, I don't feel like I should have to wait until I get a final record of decision to understand that. I think I had a commitment from the Secretary, as I think I had a commitment from you 3 years ago, and I don't think that either one of you are following up on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.